Wall Street Money Never Sleeps, which of course premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, which I first saw then, which I've seen again now. So the story is, everybody who remembers Wall Street, there was an interesting period when Michael Douglas was the zeitgeist guy. If you were making any movie with a zeitgeisty feel, you would get Michael Douglas. So if you were making Disclosure about whether a woman can sexually harass a man, you get Michael Douglas. If you were making Fatal Attraction about whether or not, an extramarital affair is always going to end in completely, you go and get Michael Douglas. And in the case of Wall Street, if you're going to make a movie about finance and is money bad and is greed good, then you go and get Michael Douglas. So Oliver Stone revisits the main characters of Wall Street, centrally Gordon Gekko, after a long period of absence in which we discover that Gekko has been in prison. The film begins with a good gag, is that Gordon Gekko comes out of prison and he goes to get his stuff back, and many of you may have read this, he goes to get his stuff back and they give him back his belongings, which include a mobile phone the size of a small hamster cage. And then he goes outside, because he was Gordon Gekko, he's very famous for, he goes out and a limousine pulls up. He imagines that the limousine is for him. It's not. It's for the black guy standing next to him, who's some kind of rap star, and Gordon Gekko is completely left on his own. So the idea of this at the beginning is the world has changed. Everything has changed since he was put in prison. Now, Gordon Gekko himself has changed, and his central message before, greed is good, has changed to the rather more ambivalent, is greed good? Here's a clip from Wall Street Money Never Sleeps.
Someone reminded me the other evening that I once said, greed is good. Now it seems it's legal. It's greed that makes your parents refinance their $200,000 house for $250,000. And then they take that extra $50,000, they go down to the mall. They buy a plasma TV, cell phones, computers, an SUV, and hey, why not a second home while we're at it? Because gee whiz, I mean, we all know the prices of houses in America always go up, right? And it's greed that makes the government in this country cut the interest rates to 1% after 9/11. So we could all go shopping again. They got all these fancy names for trillions of dollars of credit. CMOs, CDOs, SIVs, ABSs. I honestly think there's maybe only 75 people in the world who know what they are. But I'll tell you what they are. They're WMDs. Weapons of mass destruction.
Now, the interesting thing about the film is that pretty much every moment that Michael Douglas is on screen, it's interesting because he is a great screen presence. I mean, it's an interesting thing. He's got that, people have compared him in the past to Fred McMurray. He does that thing about the damaged, somehow victimized man quite well, but he also does the thing about the charismatic, slightly mad guy. He is a commanding screen presence. At the center of the original Wall Street, there was this strange paternal triangle, which had Charlie Sheen and Martin Sheen. And Martin Sheen was a character who basically represented people who did things, who made things, who built things. And Charlie Sheen was the guy who originally wanted to be his father and idolized his father, but then during the course of the movie actually decides that he wants to be Gekko. And Gekko is the character who embodies that idea that people don't make things, people make money. And there's a key scene in the first film in which Charlie Sheen says to Martin Sheen's character, he says, when I look at you, I see somebody who's, scared and afraid. And what Martin Sheen says is, no, when you look at me, you see somebody who never judged another person by the size of his wallet. And this is the sort of central thesis of Wall Street. Now, in Wall Street Money Never Sleeps, Oliver Stone is attempting once again to do that kind of strange, tortured family thing. But this time you have Shia LaBeouf, the charisma vacuum that is Shia LaBeouf, who is dating Carey Mulligan, who is the offspring of Gordon Gekko, from whom she is estranged because she is now involved in some sort of slightly revolutionary, radical journalism eco thing, which he is as well. He's involved in investment, in forming different kinds of power, and he, in the meantime, is trying to sort things out with his mother, who's running a housing business, a real estate business, and the whole thing is much more, on the one hand, complicated and flimsy, and on the other hand, just not as engaging. See, the thing with the first film is I really believed in the father-son relationship, and I really believed in the central thing, which was that the son is somehow led astray by this dazzling dream of you can make money out of nothing, you can conjure it out of thin air. In the second film, it's much more fudgy, it's much more woolly, it's much more confused. Now, you could argue to some extent that what's happened is that Stone has changed his target because the world has changed, because actually it's no longer as simple to look at the financial markets and go, okay, this is what I think about it. Actually, I don't think that's the problem at all. I think the key problem is that what's happened is that when Stone started out making movies, he was an incredibly belligerent filmmaker. And I mean, I've said this before, watching an Oliver Stone movie was like being yelled at. And so, it's, you know, if you saw Platoon was war is hell. And if you saw, you know, Any Given Sunday, it was sport is being corrupted by money. And if you saw Wall Street, it was, you know, greed is bad, money is corrupting. If you watch it now, it's like, well, you know, it's a bit difficult, and there's this and there's that. Now, you do have the character of Josh Brolin, who is doing the sort of the proper, full-on bad guy. So there is something approaching the sort of nemesis figure. But then you have Gordon Gekko, with whom Stone appears to be equally entranced and disgusted in a way that doesn't work like it did in the first film. You can't quite figure out what his taking is. And I think here's what's happened to Stone. Stone has actually become somebody who's become much more aware of the complexities of life. If you look at his documentaries, if you look at South of the Border, it's a film in which he listens to people, in which he goes and speaks to these leaders, in which he listens to them. Actually, he has matured, and in maturing he has mellowed, and during the course of that mellowing his documentary filmmaking has improved hugely, because he now makes documentaries in which he literally goes and gives other people a chance to speak. The interesting thing about it is that what he's gained in the documentary department, he's kind of lost in the dramatic department, because whatever else you thought about it, there was something about an Oliver Stone movie which was like being run down by a truck. I mean, when Wall Street was first put out, it was described as the guy who made Platoon takes the war to Wall Street, and Wall Street played like a war movie in the same way as that novel Bombardiers. I mean, it was basically something that was happening in the financial markets but played out like, well, this plays out much more like somebody who's interested in the Gekko character, wants to get the Gekko character back on screen, isn't entirely sure what to say about the financial market anymore, has completely lost sight of what he's attempting to do with the family relationship, suffers because of the fact that he's attempting to get you to invest all this interest in the Shia LaBeouf character, which I simply don't, because I don't believe in the Shia LaBeouf character. And every moment that Michael Douglas isn't on screen, the whole thing goes... And there are long sections of it in which he's not on screen. It's not terrible, and there are flashes of what made Wall Street the film it was. But as somebody who's actually admired the fact that Oliver Stone seems to have grown up and stopped yelling, I could have done with a bit more shouting and a bit less, well, you know, on the one hand this and on the other hand that. And Shia LaBeouf, what is that about? What is the whole Shia LaBeouf thing about?
Nick in Newcastle on Tyne, Dear Hobbs and Locke. Do you want to be Thomas Hobbs or John Locke?
John Locke.
We took my 4-month-old son to see Wall Street. Baby's let in
going,
again.
Great is good. Great is good.
At the excellent Tyneside Cinema, bringing in baby screening on Wednesday. At the end of the movie, I asked him what he thought of it. He replied, "Why, oh why did Oliver Stone have to do that?" "What, son?" said I. "Well," he rejoined, "he skillfully made a perfectly watchable satire on the collapse of banking and then ruined it by turning the dystopia into a utopia in a nanosecond at the end. I mean, what kind of baby was the saccharine ending aimed at? I'm only 4 months old and I could have coped with a more edgy conclusion."
I think I agree with his
Says
4-month-old
Nick's baby.
assessment. That's very good. But the problem is that by the time he gets to the end, he's so lost sight of what it is he's trying to say that anything, I mean, it is true the ending is bad, but anything would have felt like that. I mean, that's the problem. The problem is that the thing simply doesn't have a through line. It looks like it's musing and wandering and meandering, and it's and it's very ill-disciplined. I mean, it's really, really ill-disciplined. That's actually centrally the problem. And, you know, Oliver Stone movies were always overlong, but they had a forward narrative, which was Oliver just charging forward at you.